Today's the 7th and last day of the March-April 1986 retreat. There are still questions brought up in meetings that could be discussed here today. But since we've been doing it for a whole week, so many similar words being said over and over, we'll read today from Wang Po's book on Zen teaching, translated by John Blofeld, and a few selected paragraphs from Krishnamurti's notebook. The paragraphs that are read from Wang Po's book are very selected paragraphs. Sentences, words have been omitted to make it more easily understandable, less traditional vocabulary. Wang Po having lived and taught in the Zen Buddhist tradition. These paragraphs too have been read many times, and yet can one listen to them with the fresh ears of a fresh morning. The Master said to me, the one who's writing down these, what is translated as sermons and dialogues, is a disciple of his who is also a scholar and government official. All the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, beside which nothing exists. This mind, which is without beginning, is unborn and indestructible. It is not green, yellow, and has neither form nor appearance, does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of young or old. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits, measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and you at once fall into error. It is like the boundless void which cannot be fathomed or measured. The one mind alone is the Buddha, and there is no distinction between the Buddha and sentient beings, but that sentient beings are attached to forms and so seek externally for Buddhahood. By their very seeking, they lose it. For that is using mind to grasp mind. Even though they do their utmost for a full eon, they will not be able to attain it. They do not know that if they put a stop to conceptual thought and forget their anxiety, it will appear before them For this mind is Buddha, and Buddha is all living beings. It is not the less for being manifested in ordinary beings, nor is it greater for being manifested in the Buddhas. It says here, if you expect to gain anything from teachers, what is your purpose in coming here? So it is said that if you have the merest intention to indulge in conceptual thinking, behold, your very intentions will place you in the clutch of demons. If ever you should allow yourselves to believe in the more than purely transitory existence of phenomena, you will have fallen into a grave error. But if, on the contrary, you take the intrinsic voidness of phenomena to imply mere emptiness, then you have fallen into another error. How is it possible that Gautama Buddha could have originated the present conceptions of enlightenment? But as these doctrines are still commonly taught, he says this in the 9th century AD, people become involved in the duality of longing for light and eschewing darkness. The anxiety to seek enlightenment on the one hand, and to escape from the passions and ignorance of corporal existence on the other. They conceive of an enlightened Buddha and unenlightened sentient beings as separate entities. Let me assure you again that the Buddha does not dwell in light nor sentient beings in darkness, for the truth allows no such distinctions. The Buddha is not mighty nor sentient beings feeble, for the truth allows no such distinctions. The Buddha is not enlightened nor sentient beings ignorant, for the truth allows no such distinctions. It is all because you take it upon yourself to talk of explaining Zen. As soon as the mouth is opened, evils spring forth. I think we can all attest to that. People either neglect the root and speak of the branches, or neglect the reality of the world and speak only of enlightenment. Or else they chatter of cosmic activities leading to transformations, while neglecting the substance from which they spring. Indeed, there's never any profit in discussion. Close the book. Want to hear more? It's good to remember this though at times, rather than remember it, to see it when discussion just dances back and forth like ping pong balls. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you see it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past. Not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. To abolish all time, and with abolishing all time, abolishing all postponement. Seeing, understanding can only happen in the present. not in the future. That's a thought. Above all, he says, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. Nor may you entertain the least ambition to be a Buddha here and now. Even if a Buddha arises, do not think of him as enlightened or deluded, good or evil. Hasten to rid yourself of any desire to cling to him. Cut him off in the twinkling of an eye. On no account seek to hold him fast, for 1,000 locks could not stay him, nor 100,000 feet of rope bind him. This being so valiantly strive to banish and annihilate him. It's one thing the Zen sect is so proud of this kind of talk and teaching. But most of the time it just remains talk. And turns right around and worships. What one has burnt, one puts back freshly on the altar. I will now make luminously clear how to set about being rid of that Buddha. Here comes the instructions. But don't expect to get instructions, they don't come. Consider the sunlight, you may see it near, yet if you follow it from world to world, you will never catch it in your hands. Then you may describe it as far away, and lo, you will see it just before your eyes. Follow it, and behold, it escapes you. Run from it, and it follows you close. You can neither possess it nor have done with it. From this example you can understand how it is with the true nature of all things, and henceforth there will be no need to grieve or worry about such things. Now beware of going on to say that my recommendation to cut off the Buddha was profane, or that my comparing him to the sunshine was pious, as though I had wavered from one extreme to the other. Followers of the other sects would then agree with you. He goes on later. Thus all the visible universe is the Buddha, or is truth. The word Buddha here is used for the word truth. It is one of its translations. Awakened truth. So are all sounds the truth. Hold fast to one principle and all the others are identical. On seeing one thing, you see all. If that is, there is seeing. Because it doesn't matter what appears before one or inside one. What is important is that there is seeing, not what is seen. That is, as is just described here, purely transitory and not objects. It's thought that objectifies things, thought, naming, association, remembrance, and so forth. We've talked about it endlessly. On perceiving any individual's mind, you're perceiving all mind. Perceiving this mind, which is the closest at hand, this brain, which is right in this skull, one is perceiving all human mind in its fundamental movements and dynamics. I'm not talking about specific individual differences, which also come from a common pool of genetic inheritance. Ultimately from a very small band of common great-great-great-great-great grandparents. Because there was once very few of us, now there are a lot. Where do we all come from, this multiplicity? It comes from a common pool of inherited and acquired traits. Sometimes combining to manifest a genius. All the variety of different talents, characters, and so forth comes from this common pool. And one is so proud of my talent. And such problems spring from this. The pleasure of it and the isolation of envy of it. Comparisons in school. Why aren't you as clever as your older sister? Or as intelligent, and so forth. As though she or he had made that brain. One has to take time at times to reflect upon these things. To shed illusions, false thinking, stupid ideas. Obtain a glimpse of one way, and all ways are embraced in your vision. For there is nowhere at all which is devoid of the way. Nowhere at all devoid of the way, which means there's not one way or many ways from here to there. The whole thing is the way. The whole thing. So one might as well drop that word way, because it implies from here now to there in the future, where I will have accomplished my perfection or my salvation. And the attachment to these brain-produced thoughts and tradition-produced thoughts, which were the brains of our forefathers and foremothers. When your glance falls upon a grain of dust, what you see is identical with all the world systems, with their great rivers and mighty hills. To gaze upon a drop of water is to behold the nature of all the waters of the universe. Moreover, in thus contemplating the totality of phenomena, you're contemplating the totality of mind. Or one could say, the totality of mind is seeing, looking, hearing. Not a little fragment, I want that, oh, I don't like that. But the totality of mind, not compartmentalized through all our historical wishes, fears, hopes, cravings. He says, he goes on, all these phenomena are intrinsically void. Void of selfhood, separateness, objectiveness, entityness. Everything is changing and in flux. It's our names and thoughts which make packages out of a flowing whole, which is life. And then we're concerned with the little packages which the thought has created, the remembrances. All these phenomena are intrinsically void, and yet this mind with which they are identical is no mere nothingness. By this I mean it does not exist, that it does exist, but in a way too marvelous for us to comprehend, meaning to put into words, to explain logically or otherwise. Can one be that? Be that totality of life, meaning the separating and self-protecting walls and scaffolds crumbling. So this true void, he says, does in some marvelous way exist. Exist is put in quotation marks. He says here at this point, when the moment of understanding comes, do not think in terms of understanding, or not understanding, or not understanding, for none of these is something to be grasped. This truth of thusness, a word, I think it's self-explanatory, thus, the way it is. Not the way I think about it or want it to be, or my words and recognitions tell me what it is, but thusness is free from interference by the computer. When the moment of this truth, this thusness, when grasped, and grasped is put in quotation marks. This thusness, when grasped, is grasped. But he who grasps it is no more conscious of having done so than someone ignorant of it is conscious of his failure. He says, this thusness, until now so few people have come to understand it, that it is written, in this world how few are there who lose their egos. As for those people who seek to grasp it through the application of some particular principle, or by creating a special environment, or through some scripture or doctrine, or age, or time, or name, or word, or through their six senses, how do they differ from wooden dolls? Later on he says, refrain from seeking Buddhahood, since any search is doomed to failure. Some madman shrieking on the mountaintop on hearing the echo far below may go to seek it in the valley, but oh how vain his search. Once in the valley he shrieks again and straightway climbs to search among the peaks. Why, he may spend 1,000 rebirths or 10,000 eons searching for the source of those sounds by following their echoes. It's so true how much we create. We create our holy scriptures, we create our holy churches, our holy images, sculptures, incense, and then having created it out of the desire and fear, then we worship it. Then we're afraid of not worshiping, or else it'll get back at us. So it's all our own creation. This mind of thought and habit can make anything holy. But it's only the creation of its own mind. Thoughts, fears, hopes. Here, after this shrieking example, he says, far better that you make no sound at all, for then there will be no echo. No knowing, no sound, no track, no trace. Just listening. It's all there. Here, the questioner asks, what is implied by seeing into the real nature? That's put into quotes, and there's a lot of talk about seeing into the true nature of things. And he wants to know what is implied by this seeing into the real nature. And Wang Po says, that nature and your perception of it are one. You could also say, the seeing is the real nature, if you want to use those words. He says you cannot use it to see something over and above itself. That nature and your hearing of it are one. You cannot use it to hear something over and above itself. When he is about seeing into nature or hearing the true nature of things, then the ear is sort of strained to hear something. By the very straining, they don't hear. It's hearing or seeing without objects. If objects are there, they're there. If they're not there, is that the end of the seeing and listening? Of course not. Seeing and hearing, which are not really different, don't depend on objects. He says, if you form a concept of the true nature of anything as being visible or audible, you allow a division to arise. Let me repeat that the perceived cannot perceive. Can there, I ask you, be a head attached to the crown of your head? He says, here, I'll give you an example to make my meaning clearer. Imagine some loose pearls in a bowl, some large globules, and some small. None causes the least obstruction to the rest. During their formation, they did not say, now I am coming into being. We didn't say that either when we were born. Now I'm coming into being. Here I am. It comes later. And we're aided in that by our parents and sisters, brothers. When they begin to decay, they will not say, "Now I am decaying." So why this talk of I see, I hear, I receive an intuition, I hear the Dharma or the truth from the lips of an enlightened one? I assure you, he says later, that all things have been free from bondage since the very beginning. So why attempt to explain them? Why attempt to purify what has never been defiled? Later on he says, the man who perceives things always wants to identify them, to get a hold of them. And because either we want to physically possess something we see or get a hold of it through naming it, explaining it, incorporating it into our body of knowledge with which we are strongly identified, gives us a sense of security, of being somebody. We've learned from very, very early age that if you don't know anything, you're stupid and you're given a bad grade, a low grade. So knowledge must be something very valuable here. And I don't mean this natural interest that already little children have in finding out about things, but their interest is not so much verbal, it's direct. Taking it in the mouth first. Taste it. Feel it with the most sensitive areas of the body. But the value of knowledge per se, just to have knowledge, is conditioned. The man who perceives things always wants to identify them, to get a hold of them. Those who use their minds like eyes in this way are sure to suppose that progress is a matter of stages. If you're that kind of a person, you're as far from the truth as earth is far from heaven. So why this talk of seeing into our own nature, or into your own nature? But the questioner persists. He says, you say that our original nature and the act of seeing into it are one and the same. This can only be so if that nature is totally undifferentiated. He continues thinking about it, which is what maybe it's all he can do, or he doesn't stop to listen. It happens sometimes in discussion periods too. Something is said, and immediately another question. Something is said, immediately another question. We also have been trained to sort of quick. Immediately need a solution to a problem. Always concerned with the immediate, which blocks feeling and vision of the whole. And not falling into this conditioned habit, but taking a moment to look, listen. So that the words don't just come from our automatic repertoire of phrases and answers, but are formed in the process of looking at something. if I want to go into all this thing, some of it's very hair-splitting. And part of the question. At another time he says, what guidance does your reverence offer to those of us who find all this very difficult to understand? And Wang Po says, I have no thing to offer. I've never had anything to offer another. It is because you allow certain people to lead you astray that you are forever seeking intuition and searching for understanding. Isn't this a case of disciples and teachers all falling into the same insoluble muddle? And then he gives a few things here. He says, learn not to pay attention to any distinctions between this and that, arising from your sensations, thereby purging your bodies of useless discernment between one phenomenon and another. I think more simply put is, not just don't name, but be aware of what the process of naming does. Be aware of that the process of naming is going on. That's the first step. Before one tries to prevent something from happening, one must be very clearly aware that it is in fact happening. Or else it's just a conditioning built on top of another one. This is what we do to ourselves. And then we wonder why we're so confused and cluttered. Like a case of severe indigestion. Then he says, take great care to avoid discriminating in terms of pleasant and unpleasant, thereby purging your bodies of vain discriminations. We've talked about this when we talked here about the floor. First, just this, then the word floor, and then associations with how it came into being, but also, I don't like this floor. I wish we had had red maple. I would have given some color to this room. Or whatever. We come up with it. To see that at that moment, this is not seen anymore. One envisions a different kind of a floor, and at the same time feels that one exists as somebody who is discerning or discriminating, has good taste or better taste. One is, again, somebody in the process of liking and disliking. Sometimes one says, I don't like this, or not so much because one doesn't like it, but rather one has to look at it, whether this is so. I'm questioning it. Rather to be somebody who has some preferences. Seems that people whom one admires always have ideas about this and that, and opinions and a point of view. So one has to be very careful when one is on the receiving end. Let's say one has cooked a meal, put a lot of effort into it, is very much identified with it, came out good, and then somebody says, I don't like it. Or a person wouldn't say, I don't like it. They would say, you could add a little this or that to it. People who have worked in the kitchen have at times wanted to tear their hair out over this after a retreat, or so all the suggestions that come. And maybe one is receiving this wrongly. It's not that the person doesn't like what was there, but one wants to be somebody and giving a suggestion, be helpful. You know what I mean? sort of in a spirit of extending a friendly helping hand. But not that. What is at the source of it is to feel oneself existing as something. If one discovers that, sees it, one may abstain from that. It's not that hard. And get a taste of how it is to taste the food without being anybody. It starts with these little things. Not with how can I get rid of myself? That's an impossible question. It's like starting with Mount Everest. I'll just do this last one so we can get on to the other one too. The very last selection in this book is, but how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? How can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? And Wang Po, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but never withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, the future has not yet come. Sit in the proper position, stay perfectly tranquil, do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Be diligent, be diligent. This book is called Krishnamurti's Notebook. In case you have not heard it yet, Krishnamurti died in February. This was written in 1961. These were just notes written by him on his talking tours. These two notes written in Italy in the fall. These two are excerpts. It had begun to rain, and the sky was heavy with clouds. Before the sky was covered over entirely, Immense clouds filled the horizon, and it was a marvelous thing to see them. They were so immense and peaceful. It was the peace of enormous power and strength. And the Tuscan hills were so close to them, waiting for their fury. It came during the night, shattering thunder and lightning that showed every leaf aquiver with wind and life. It was a splendid night full of storm, life, and immensity. The body and the brain were very alert, listening to the rustle of leaves and seeing the dawn coming through the dark branches of a tall, straight pine. It had great tenderness and beauty that was past and beyond all thought and emotion. It was there, and with it was benediction. Strength is not the opposite of weakness. All opposites breed further opposites. Strength is not an event of will, and will is action in contradiction. There is a strength that has no cause, that is not put together through multiple decisions. It is that strength that comes into being out of total aloneness. It is that strength which comes when all conflict and effort have completely ceased. It is there when all thought and feeling have come to an end, and there's only seeing. It is there when ambition, greed, envy have come to an end without any compulsion. They wither away with understanding. There is that strength when love is death and death is life. The essence of strength is humility. How strong is the newborn leaf in spring, so vulnerable, so easily destroyed. And the next day, it had been raining all day, the roads were slushy, and there was more brown water in the river, and the slight fall of the river was making more noise. It was a still night, an invitation to the rains which never stopped till early this morning. And the sun suddenly came out, and towards the west the sky was blue, rain-washed and clean, with those enormous clouds full of light and splendor. It was a beautiful morning, and looking to the west, with the sky so intensely blue, all thought and emotion disappeared, and the seeing was from emptiness. Early this morning the sky was without a cloud, the sun was coming up behind the hills, gray with olive, with dark cypress. There were no shadows on the river, and the aspen leaves were still. A few birds that had not yet migrated were chattering, and the river seemed motionless. As the sun came up behind the river, it cast long shadows on the quiet water. But a gentle breeze was coming over the hills and through the valleys. It was among the leaves, setting them trembling and dancing with the morning sun on them. There were long and short shadows, fat ones and little ones, on the brown sparkling waters. A solitary chimney began to smoke, gray fumes carrying across the trees. It was a lovely morning, full of enchantment and beauty. There were so many shadows and so many leaves trembling. There was perfume in the air, and though it was an autumnal sun, there was the breath of spring. A small car was going up the hill, making an awful noise, but 1,000 shadows remained motionless. It was a lovely morning. And then later on, the intense energy of life is always there, night and day. It is without friction, without direction, without choice and effort. It is there with such intensity that thought and feeling cannot capture it, to mold it according to their fancies, beliefs, experiences, and demands. It is there with such abundance that nothing can diminish it. But we try to use it, to give it direction, to capture it within the mold of our existence, and thereby twist it to conform to our pattern, experience, and knowledge. It is ambition, envy, greed that narrow down its energy, and so there is conflict and sorrow. The cruelty of ambition, personal or collective, distorts its intensity, causing hatred, antagonism, and conflict. Every action of envy perverts this energy, causing discontent, misery, fear. With fear there is guilt and anxiety and the never-ending misery of comparison and imitation. It is this perverted energy that makes the priest and the general, the politician and the thief. This boundless energy, made incomplete by our desire for permanency and security, is the soil in which grow barren ideas, competition, cruelty, and war. It is the cause of everlasting conflict between man and man. When all this is put aside with ease and without effort, then only is there that intense energy which can only exist and flower in freedom. In freedom alone it causes no conflict and no sorrow. Then alone it increases and has no end. It is life that has no beginning and no end. It is creation, which is love, destruction. Energy used in one direction leads to one thing, conflict and sorrow. Energy that is the expression of total life is bliss beyond measure. We will end here for today.